The blood told its story before Jedediah Hollister ever reached the cabin. He had been riding 4 days from Rawlins, his saddlebags heavy with ammunition and salt. The January wind cut through Wyoming territory like a razor, and the Mustang beneath him, a war horse named Scout, had grown restless the last mile home. Now Jed understood why. Scout stopped 50 yards from the cabin, ears pinned forward, nostrils flaring. The horse had survived Gettysburg. He knew the smell of trouble before trouble showed its face. Jed's hand moved to the holster on his hip. The Colt's single-action army slid out smooth and quiet, the way it had 1,000 times before. He scanned the tree line first, then the ridge, then the ground directly ahead. A dark trail cut through the white snow, starting at the fence post, ending at his cabin door. Fresh blood, and not a little of it. Jed dismounted without sound. His boots touched frozen ground, and he moved forward in a zigzag pattern, old habits from his years as a Union sharpshooter. He used the water trough for cover, then the woodpile, approaching the cabin the way a wolf approaches uncertain prey. The blood had partially frozen. Whoever left this trail had arrived 2 hours ago, maybe 3, long enough to bleed out if the wound was bad. He pressed his back against the cabin wall. The door hung slightly open, swaying in the wind. Inside, dying embers glowed orange in the iron stove. Someone was in his home. Jed kicked the door wide and swept the room with his pistol raised. A figure lunged from the corner. Steel flashed in the dim light. Woman, native, Shoshone by the cut of her buckskin dress. She was pressed against the wall, wrapped in his bear hide blanket, her left shoulder dark with dried blood. The knife in her hand caught the firelight. She held it like someone who had used one before. "Put it down," Jed said. "Come closer, and I will open your throat." Her voice shook. Her hand did not. "If I wanted you dead, you would have been dead before you saw my face. This is my cabin, my blanket you are wearing, probably my knife in your hand. Put it down." 10 seconds passed. The fire crackled. Wind moaned through the gap in the door. Then she lowered the blade. Not from fear. She had recognized something in his eyes, the same bone-deep exhaustion she carried in her own. Jed holstered the Colt but kept his hand near it. He stepped inside and kicked the door shut against the cold. "Sit," he said. "I need to see that shoulder." The bullet had passed clean through the meat of her shoulder. Good news. No digging required. Bad news, she had lost enough blood to kill a smaller person. Jed worked without speaking. He cleaned the wound with whiskey, packed it with strips torn from an old cotton shirt. She never flinched, never made a sound, just watched him with dark eyes that held more pain than any bullet hole could explain. When he finished, he sat back and studied her face. "You want to tell me what happened?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice came flat and empty, the voice of someone who had moved beyond tears. "My name is Naira. My people camp in the Wind River Valley, 15 miles north of here. I know the area. 6 white men came to our camp 2 days ago. They said the land belongs to someone else now. They gave us 1 day to leave." Jed felt his jaw tighten. "Your people refused." "My brother refused. Stone River. He was our leader." Something flickered behind her eyes. "He told them the land belonged to our ancestors, that no piece of paper signed in some white man's office could change 1,000 years of truth." What happened next? The one in charge, tall man, scar on his face, he pulled his pistol and shot my brother in the heart, standing right in front of the whole tribe. Then his men opened fire on everyone. Jed stood slowly. His knees popped in the cold air. "How many dead?" "5. My brother. 2 warriors. 1 old woman. 1 child who was only 8 summers old." "And the rest of your people?" "Scattered, running south toward Fort Washakie. I ran the wrong direction. Into the mountains. They chased me for miles. She touched her wounded shoulder. One of them was a better shot than the others. Jed walked to the window and looked out at the darkening valley. Snow was falling again, light flakes drifting down from a slate-gray sky. His mind worked through the information, sorting facts the way a soldier sorts intelligence before battle. This man with the scar, tell me exactly what he looked like. Tall, taller than you. Black coat that reached past his knees. Hair dark but going gray at the temples. The scar runs from his left ear down to his chin, like someone tried to cut his face in half and failed. What did the others call him? Colonel. Jed's hand closed into a fist so tight his knuckles went white. He knew that scar. He had seen it through a rifle scope at Gettysburg, 12 years and a lifetime ago. A Confederate captain standing beside a burning farmhouse, laughing while a family screamed inside. Jed had lined up the shot, held his breath, squeezed the trigger, and missed. The one shot in his life that truly mattered, and he had missed. His name is Silas Crane, Jed said quietly. Naira looked up. You know this man? I know him. Jed crossed to the shelf above his bed and took down a rifle wrapped in oiled cloth. The Sharps Model 1874, the same weapon he had carried through every major battle of the Civil War. He unwrapped it slowly, running his fingers along the cold steel barrel. He was a captain in the Confederate Army, specialized in burning villages and killing people who could not fight back. After the war, he drifted west. I heard rumors he was dead. He is not dead. He kills my people now. He kills anyone who has something he wants. Jed opened the rifle's breech and peered down the barrel, checking for rust. Question is, what does he want with your land? Wind River Valley is beautiful country, but there is nothing there worth killing for. Naira hesitated. Then she said, before he died, my brother told me something. 2 weeks before the attack, a man from Denver came to our camp. He wore a fine suit and carried papers. He offered to buy our land for what he called a generous price. How much? $300 for the entire valley. Jed almost laughed. $300 for land worth 50 times that amount. What did your brother say? He said the land of our ancestors was not for sale. Not for $300, not for $3 million. The man in the suit smiled and said, if you will not sell, we will find another way to acquire it. Jed slid a cartridge into the sharps and closed the breech with a solid click. Silver. There is a silver deposit somewhere in those hills. I heard miners talking about it in Rawlins last month. Big strike up north. Mining companies from Denver have been buying claims all winter, trying to get ahead of the rush. And Silas Crane? He is their attack dog. They point him at a problem, and he makes it disappear. Jed set the rifle on the table and looked at Naira. They hire men like Crane to clear the land, kill the people living there or scare them off. Then the company buys the property cheap from the government, files a mining claim, and gets rich while families rot in unmarked graves. Naira's eyes hardened into black stones. What are you going to do? Jed was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Old Horse Brennan, his only neighbor, the man who had shared whiskey and stories with him through 3 long winters. He thought about the child Naira mentioned, 8 years old, shot dead for living on the wrong piece of dirt. He thought about Silas Crane laughing beside that burning farmhouse at Gettysburg. I had him in my sights once, Jed said. I missed. I do not plan on missing again. Morning arrived cold and gray, the sky heavy with clouds that promised more snow before nightfall. Jed saddled Scout before dawn and rode east toward the only neighbor he trusted, Horace Brennan, known to everyone in the territory as Old Horse. The nickname came from his years as an Army scout in the 1850s, tracking Comanche raiders across the Texas plains. He could read sign better than any man Jed had ever met, could tell you how many horses passed a spot and how long ago just by looking at bent grass and disturbed stones. Now he was 62 years old, living alone on a small spread 3 miles from Jed's cabin. His wife Martha had died of cholera back in '71, and he had never even considered remarrying. One good woman was enough for any lifetime, he always said. I will see her again soon enough. Jed found him in the barn, forking hay to a pair of ancient mules. Old Horse looked up and squinted through the dim light. You look like a man carrying bad news, Jed. Silas Crane. The old scout's weathered face went hard as granite. He drove the pitchfork into a hay bale and spat on the frozen ground. That murderous son of a bitch? I heard somebody finally put him down in Abilene 2 years back. You heard wrong. He is alive and working for a mining company out of Denver, clearing land up in Wind River Valley for a silver operation. Clearing it how? The permanent way. Killed 5 Shoshone 2 days ago, including women and children. One survivor made it to my cabin last night with a bullet hole in her shoulder. Old Horse pulled the pitchfork free and leaned on it, studying Jed's face with eyes that had seen more violence than most men could imagine. You are going after him. I am. Alone? Do not have much choice in the matter. Old Horse was quiet for a long moment. Snow began falling outside, light flakes drifting past the barn door. Then he walked to the back of the building and returned carrying a Remington Army revolver, well-oiled and ready for use. I owe the Shoshone a debt, he said. Winter of '58, I got caught in a blizzard up near the Bighorn Mountains. Would have frozen solid as a fence post if a hunting party had not found me. They kept me in their camp for 2 weeks, fed me, tended my frost-bitten hands. Would not take payment of any kind. This is not your fight, Horse. The hell it is not. The old man checked the revolver cylinder, spinning it with his thumb. Besides, you need someone watching your back. Silas Crane never fought fair a day in his miserable life. He will not start now. Jed considered arguing. Then he remembered that Old Horse had survived 30 years on the frontier by being smarter and meaner than the men trying to kill him. Having him along might mean the difference between success and a shallow grave. Tomorrow night, Jed said. Meet me at Broken Pine Ridge, halfway to Devil's Pass. That is where Crane has his camp. I will be there. You can count on it. Jed searched the cabin before leaving. Old Horse had always been a meticulous record keeper, and Jed wanted to know if the mining company had contacted him too. He found what he was looking for in the bottom drawer of the old scout's desk. A letter, crumpled, half burned in the stove, but still readable. The letterhead showed an engraved mountain with the words, Union Pacific Mining Company, Denver, Colorado, printed beneath it. The message was brief. Mr. Brennan, we are prepared to offer $200 for your property, including all structures and water rights. This is our final offer. We strongly encourage you to accept. Those who refuse our generous terms often find that frontier life becomes significantly more dangerous. Sincerely, R.J. Morrison, Director of Land Acquisition. The letter was dated 3 weeks ago. Old Horse had refused their money, and now Jed was about to ask him to risk his life against the very men who had threatened him. He folded the letter and put it in his coat pocket. Old Horse deserved to know what he was getting into. The decision to fight had to be made with clear eyes. When Jed returned to his cabin, Naira was sitting by the stove, examining the Winchester rifle that hung on the wall above his bed. Her wounded shoulder was still bandaged, but her movements were stronger than yesterday. The color had returned to her face. She looked up when he entered. You found an ally. Maybe. There is something he needs to see first. Jed hung his coat by the door and pulled out the letter. I found this in his cabin. The same mining company threatened him 3 weeks ago. Naira took the letter and read it slowly, her lips moving slightly over the English words. When she finished, her expression had not changed. They threatened him. He did not run. Now you are asking him to fight. I am giving him the choice. That is more than Silas Crane gave your people. She handed the letter back. He will fight. Men like him, men like you, do not run from threats. It is not in your nature. Jed studied her face. How would you know what is in my nature? We met 12 hours ago. I know because I watched you. She stood slowly, testing her wounded shoulder with a careful rotation. When you found me in your cabin, you could have thrown me out into the snow. You could have turned me over to the men chasing me. Instead, you cleaned my wound, fed me, gave me your blanket. A man who does those things for a stranger does not run from a fight. She crossed to the wall and took down the Winchester, held it one-handed, sighting down the barrel toward the window. I am coming with you, she said. Your shoulder is not healed. It is healed enough. She worked the lever action, chambering an imaginary round with smooth precision. My brother taught me to shoot when I was 7 years old. First with a bow, then with rifles we traded for. I was the best hunter among the women of my tribe. Hunting deer is not the same as hunting men. The principle is identical. Breathe in, hold steady. Squeeze the trigger in the space of a single breath. Her dark eyes met his. I have been hunted my entire life, Jed Hollister, by soldiers, by settlers, by men who saw my people as obstacles to be removed. It is time I became the hunter. Jed held her gaze for a long moment. He saw grief there, raw and bleeding, but beneath it burned something harder, the cold determination of someone who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. If you come, you follow my orders. No arguments, no hesitation. Understood? Understood! He took the Winchester from her hands and carried it outside. The snow had stopped, leaving the yard blanketed in fresh white. He set up empty tin cans at 50, 75, on 100 yards. Show me what you can do, he said. The next 2 days passed in preparation. Nara's shooting improved with each session, 8 hits out of 10 at 100 yards by the second afternoon. Jed taught her the Winchester's quirks, how to adjust for crosswinds, how to compensate for the slight pull to the left that plagued the older model. She learned fast. Survival demanded nothing less. On the morning of the 4th day, Jed saddled Scout and rode to Broken Pine Ridge to meet Old Horse. The old Scout never arrived. Jed waited an hour past the agreed time, watching the trail, listening for hoofbeats that never came. The silence pressed against him like a weight. Something was wrong. He rode hard toward Old Horse's cabin. The body hung from the oak tree in the front yard. Old Horse swayed gently in the morning breeze, his neck bent at an impossible angle, his face purple and swollen beyond recognition. He had been dead at least 12 hours since sometime the previous night. Pinned to his chest was a scrap of paper with 4 words scrawled in charcoal. You are next. SC. Jed sat motionless on his horse for a long time. The wind made the rope creak against the branch. Snowflakes drifted down and settled on Old Horse's gray hair, on his shoulders, on the hands that had saved Jed's life more than once over the years. 30 years on the frontier. Wars against Comanches and outlaws in the land itself. Blizzards and droughts and every kind of hardship a man could face. And he died like this. Murdered in the night by cowards who killed from the shadows. Jed dismounted slowly. He cut the rope with his knife and caught the body before it hit the ground. Old Horse weighed almost nothing, just bones and leather and a lifetime of memories. He dug the grave himself, 3 hours of brutal work with a pickaxe, breaking through frozen ground that fought him every inch. He buried Old Horse next to Martha, beneath the wooden cross the old man had carved himself. No prayers. Jed had stopped believing in God at Gettysburg, the day he watched boys younger than Naira blown apart by artillery fire, while chaplains promised them heaven waited on the other side. Instead, he made a promise of his own. I will kill him, Horse, for you, for the child he murdered, for all of them. I swear it on your grave. When Jed returned to the cabin, his face told Naira everything she needed to know. They killed him, she said, hanged him from his own tree, left a message. What did it say? That I am next. Naira absorbed this without visible reaction. She had grown up in a world where death came sudden and often. One more body changed nothing about what had to be done. When do we leave? She asked. Tonight, after dark. They rode out as the last light faded from the sky, moving through the darkness with only starlight to guide them. Jed led the way on Scout, picking a careful path through the snow. Naira followed on a steady mare from his barn, not fast but sure-footed and quiet. Devil's Pass lay 8 miles northwest, a narrow canyon that provided natural shelter from the wind. According to Old Horse, Silas had made his camp at the eastern entrance, where a cluster of boulders formed a natural fortress. They reached a high ridge overlooking the canyon just before dawn. Jed dismounted and crawled to the edge, pulling out a battered telescope. The camp spread out below. 4 men sat around a fire, rifles propped against nearby rocks. Horses stood tied to a picket line. A large canvas tent, Silas's quarters, stood apart from the others. 4 men visible, but Old Horse had said there were 6, counting Silas himself. Where were the other 2? The answer came before Jed could react. A rifle cracked from the rocks behind them. The bullet tore through Jed's right thigh before he heard the shot. He went down hard, rolling behind a boulder as a second round kicked up snow where his head had been a heartbeat earlier. Ambush. Silas had expected them. Naira reacted without hesitation. She spun toward the muzzle flash and fired 3 times in rapid succession. A scream echoed off the canyon walls, followed by the sound of a body tumbling down rocks. Jed! She scrambled to his side, keeping low. I am hit. He pressed his hand against the wound. Blood welled between his fingers, hot and thick. Right leg, missed the bone. From somewhere below, Silas Crane's voice echoed up the canyon. Hollister! I knew you would come. You always were predictable. Naira was already tearing a strip from her dress. She wrapped it around his thigh and pulled tight enough to make him gasp. A field tourniquet. She had learned the technique from tribal healers. There is a cave, she said, 200 yards west. I saw it when we approached. Can you make it? Do I have a choice? They moved through the darkness, Jed leaning heavily on Naira's shoulder, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Bullets cracked past them. Poorly aimed shots fired more to frighten than to kill. Silas was playing with them. The cave was shallow but deep enough to provide cover from direct fire. Naira helped Jed inside and propped him against the cold stone wall. His vision was blurring. The blood loss was catching up with him. Stay awake, Naira said. She was already gathering dry brush for a small fire, positioning it where the light would not be visible from outside. You do not have permission to die. Was not asking for permission. Good. She knelt beside him and checked the wound again. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. Because I need you alive long enough to watch Silas Crane pay for what he has done. The night passed in fragments of consciousness and pain. Naira kept watch at the cave entrance, the Winchester across her knees while Jed drifted in and out of awareness. His fever spiked before dawn. The wound was beginning to fester, but she cleaned it again with the last of his whiskey and packed it with sage leaves she had gathered from the hillside at first light. Old medicine. Her grandmother's medicine. It had saved warriors before. By mid-morning, the fever had broken. Jed's eyes were clearer, his breathing steadier, though his face remained pale from blood loss. You should have left, he said. His voice came out as a dry rasp. Naira did not look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the canyon below. You speak foolishness. I speak truth. You could survive on your own. Find your people at Fort Washakie. Survival is not the same as living. She finally turned to face him. I do not abandon people who fight for me. That is not who I am. That is not who my brother raised me to be. Jed studied her face in the pale morning light. Exhaustion had carved dark circles beneath her eyes, but her jaw remained set with determination. She reminded him of soldiers he had known during the war, the ones who kept fighting after everyone else had surrendered to despair. "What do you see down there?" he asked. "They broke camp an hour ago. 3 men and Silas are riding out. They think you bled to death during the night. Where are they heading?" "West through Widow's Ridge. I know the place." A thin smile crossed her lips. "It is perfect for an ambush." Jed tried to sit up straighter. Pain shot through his leg, but he pushed through it. "I cannot walk that distance. Not with this leg." "You do not need to walk. You only need to shoot." She handed him the Sharp's rifle. "I will bring them to you." "Explain." "I will let them see me. Just a glimpse. Enough to make them curious. Then I will lead them through the ridge, right into your line of fire. You will be waiting above, where the rocks provide a clear shot." Jed shook his head. "That is suicide." "No, that is hunting." She checked the Winchester one final time, working the action with smooth confidence. "I have been prey my entire life. Today I become the predator." Getting into position took 2 agonizing hours. Jed crawled most of the way, dragging his wounded leg through snow and rock, biting down on a leather strap to keep from crying out. Every yard was agony. Every breath felt like fire spreading through his veins. But he made it. The ridge overlooked a narrow path through the rocks, the only route through Widow's Ridge wide enough for horses. Anyone riding through would be completely exposed for 30 seconds. 30 seconds was all Jed needed. He settled behind a flat boulder, propping the Sharps on a natural stone rest. Distance to the kill zone, approximately 250 yards. Long but manageable. He had made harder shots during the war, in worse conditions, with less at stake. He adjusted the rear sight, calculated for the light wind from the southeast, and waited. Below, Naira emerged from the tree line at the southern edge of the ridge. She stood in plain view for a long moment, long enough for anyone watching to see her clearly, then disappeared back into the trees. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then shouts rose from below, men scrambling, horses being mounted in haste. Silas Crane's voice cutting through the noise, barking orders. The hunt was on. Jed watched through the telescope as 4 riders thundered up the trail. Silas rode in front, his black coat streaming behind him like a banner of death. 3 men followed close behind, rifles drawn. They entered the killing zone. Jed breathed in, held it, let half the breath escape, squeezed the trigger in the space between heartbeats. The Sharps kicked hard against his shoulder. 280 yards away, the lead rider jerked backward and tumbled from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Jed worked the lever. A fresh cartridge slid into the chamber. 7 seconds. He fired again. The second rider clutched his chest and slumped sideways, falling beneath his horse's hooves. Silas and the remaining gunmen threw themselves from their saddles, scrambling for cover behind a cluster of boulders. Jed cursed under his breath. He had lost his angle. They were in his blind spot now, shielded by the same terrain that had given him his advantage. Stalemate. "Hollister!" Silas's voice echoed across the rocks, carrying a note of dark amusement. "You are still alive! I should have known!" Jed did not waste breath on a response. He scanned the rocks below, searching for any sign of movement. "Give me the woman!" Silas shouted. "Hand her over, and I will let you ride away. You have my word." The word of Silas Crane, the man who had burned families alive at Gettysburg, the man who had shot an unarmed tribal leader in front of his own people, the man who had hanged Old Horse Brennan like a common criminal. His word was worth less than nothing. Minutes stretched into an eternity. 5, 10, 15. Then Jed caught movement, not from Silas's position, but from behind it. Nara, She had circled around while Jed held their attention, moving through the rocks with the silent grace of a mountain lion stalking prey. She was now 40 yards behind them, approaching from their blind side. The remaining gunman saw her first. He spun, bringing his rifle up. Naira fired twice. Both shots struck center mass. The man collapsed without a sound, dead before his brain registered the bullets. Silas whirled, his pistol rising toward Naira. Jed tried for the shot. His hands were shaking. Blood loss, exhaustion, the cold seeping into his bones. He squeezed the trigger anyway. Missed. The bullet sparked off rock 3 feet to Silas's left. Silas laughed, a high, ugly sound. "Getting slow in your old age, Hollister." He aimed at Naira, finger tightening on the trigger. A single shot rang out, not from Jed, not from Silas, from Naira. She had fired first in the split second while Silas gloated over Jed's miss. The bullet struck him low in the gut, punching through his black coat and out the other side. Silas staggered. His pistol fell from nerveless fingers. He dropped to his knees, both hands pressed against the wound in his belly, blood pouring between his fingers. Naira walked toward him slowly, the Winchester held ready. Her face showed no emotion. Her eyes were winter ice. She stopped 3 feet away and looked down at the man who had murdered her brother. "You!" Silas gasped. Blood bubbled at his lips. "The Apache woman. My name is Naira, sister of Stone River, the man you shot in the heart while he stood unarmed before you. He was just a savage. He was a chief, a warrior, a good man who never harmed anyone who did not first try to harm him." She raised the Winchester, pointing the barrel at his face. "He was worth 100 of you." Silas tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace of pain. "Kill me will not change anything. The company will send more men." "I know." Naira's finger found the trigger. "But today, you answer for what you did." She thought of Stone River, of his smile on summer mornings, of the way he had carried her on his shoulders when she was small, calling her Little Hawk because she was always watching the sky, of the light leaving his eyes as he fell in the dirt of their ancestors' land. "Rest now, brother," she whispered. "He has paid." One shot, clean and final. Silas Crane, former Confederate captain, murderer, thief of land and lives, fell backward into the snow. He did not move again. The journey back to the cabin took most of the day. Jed had lost too much blood to sit upright in the saddle, so Naira rigged a travois from pine branches and rope, pulling him behind her horse like cargo. It was undignified, but it kept him alive. By the time they reached home, the sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of gold and crimson. A week passed. Jed's wound began to heal, slowly at first, then faster as Naira's medicines took effect. She changed his bandages twice a day, boiled sage and yarrow into poultices that smelled terrible, but drew out the infection, made him drink bitter teas that tasted like dirt mixed with despair. On the 7th day, he could stand with the help of a crutch carved from oak. On the 12th day, he walked to the porch and watched the sunrise for the first time since Devil's Pass. Naira stood beside him, wrapped in the bear hide blanket. The morning air was cold enough to turn their breath to clouds, but neither moved to go inside. "Your people," Jed said finally. "Where are they now?" "South, near Fort Washakie. The survivors are rebuilding what they can. You should go to them." "I will, when the snow melts and the pass is clear." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Spring is not far. And until then," Naira looked at him, really looked, the way she had that first night when she was deciding whether he was threat or sanctuary. "Until then, you need someone to change those bandages, someone to watch the ridgeline while you heal." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "Someone who can actually hit what she aims at." Jed almost laughed. Almost. Fair enough, he said. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb above the mountains. The valley stretched before them, white and pristine, beautiful despite everything that had happened. Spring is coming, Naira said. It is. She turned to face him. What happens then? Jed thought about the letter from Union Pacific Mining Company, still folded in his coat pocket, about the silver deposits waiting beneath the mountains, about the men in Denver offices who would send more gunmen, more killers, more Silas Cranes to take what they wanted. The fight was far from over. It was barely beginning. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Then we face it, he said. Together. Naira nodded once. No promises made. No declarations spoken. Just two people who had walked through fire together and emerged on the other side. The wind carried the last cold breath of winter across the valley. And for the first time in more years than he could count, Jedediah Hollister felt something he had almost forgotten existed. Hope. 3 months later, the wagons appeared on the horizon. 6 of them, canvas-topped, flying the flag of Union Pacific Mining Company. Jed watched them through his telescope from the ridge above the cabin. 20 men, maybe more, armed and riding with purpose. Beside him, Naira chambered a round into the Winchester. Ready? She asked. Jed lowered the telescope, looked at the woman who had become his partner, his ally, his reason to keep fighting. Always, he said. The wagons kept coming, and Jedediah Hollister smiled.